So let's get started. As Liliana just pointed out, we record this and we will try to answer all your questions after my colleague Almut has presented the grant program. We have plenty of time. We have nothing planned for this afternoon, so you can always chat with us after the talks. So here we go. I'll intend to give first an introduction so that everybody who does not know HFSP has an idea where we come from, and those who know us already may get a little fresh up on HFSP. So with me today is my colleague Almut Kelber. She's the director of our award office, and Liliana, she's our science and communications officer. So today I introduce HFSP, then Almut will give an overview of the HFSP research grants, and then we have a Q&A session. To begin with, for those who don't know, HFSPO is the result of a science diplomacy/diplomacy initiative at the G7 level, which was headed by the Japanese government in the mid-1980s under the leadership of former Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone, whom you see here in the picture next to Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. So they had a discussion that was accompanied by scientific meetings and which led then to the decision by the heads of state at their Venice 1987 economic summit in Venice to initiate HFSP as a program. So that has evolved over the many years that we exist. We have our 35th anniversary year this year, and many other countries have joined, and we are currently supported by 17 members. That's member countries plus the European Commission, and representing all the European countries that are not G7 nations on their own right. HFSP started in 1990 to award grants and fellowships. We're headquartered in the northeast of France, in Strasbourg, in a beautiful medieval city. And we currently run on a budget of about $60 million every year, provided by our member countries. So what is our mission? And this is a stunning fact, because all this has been created and developed in the late 1980s and is still a very valid concept, as we think, because HFSP is supposed to support basic research in the life sciences by financing innovative, really cutting-edge research that extends the frontier. I've been often asked, what do you think about, what do you see is a frontier? I always answer, well, when you come to a point where you have no knowledge about something, that's the frontier. This is what we want to fund. So really, HFSP plays priority on really analyzing, elucidating complex mechanisms of living organisms from a basic biological process. Clearly, this is driven by scientific merit, mostly also by international collaborations, ideally also intercontinental, and very important to us, everything we support has an interdisciplinary component in one way or the other. We were really pleased that last year, this notion of HFSP as a collaborative, voluntary program between nations was received again very well at this G Science and Technology Ministers Summit in Sendai in Japan, and they renewed their appreciation of what we do. And it's in the minutes of that meeting, which gives us sort of another momentum going forward in our new strategic plan. So what are we doing actually concretely for the researchers? There are several program activities that we maintain. Today, we talk about our research grants program. We have a second leg, which is support for postdoctoral researchers in the life sciences, but also with the cross-disciplinary fellowships. We support scientists that come with a degree in math, in material science, in chemistry or physics, who have an interest to move to a biological research environment. We have a special initiative with special support from the European Commission that we maintain to support Ukrainian researchers that are affected by the war in their country. We have an annual prize, which is called the HFSP Nakasone Award, and this is an award that sort of recompensates a breakthrough discovery of seminal importance. And then, of course, what we do in terms of outreach, we engage our community. We're not just funders, we really try to engage and nurture our community. And for that, we do frontier workshops, but we also have an annual meeting of the scientists that we support, which is taking place every year in one of our member countries. What is so unique about HFSP and what is our value proposition? And this is summarized here. HFSP is really currently the only known publicly funded organization where governments or countries put their money into a single pot with literally no strings attached. There's no geopolitical priority or even scientific topics that govern our grant making. It's fully bottom-up, curiosity-driven, idea-driven. So you approach HFSP with an idea and not with preliminary data. It is very cross-disciplinary and highly international. It's a core concept of our grant-making process. We do support discovery research, even if there is a risk entailed. You're expected to shine. We accept that something doesn't work. That's normal when you do basic research. But for that, we do provide flexibility and a very limited administrative load. So in all, it's really Science Without Borders approach that we successfully carry out since 35 years from our Strasbourg Secretariat. So how do we operate? As I mentioned, we get our annual budget from the member countries. They pay this into our overall pot. We manage the proposal and award system with a central budget that only answers to merit in scientific excellence. Then you, the research community, you would submit your proposal through our system. It's no priority areas. It's completely bottom up. It's you who decide what kind of research you want to do within the overall framework of our scientific realm. Interdisciplinary is preconditional, as I mentioned. So we will manage this proposal submission process. We will engage with cross-disciplinary independent peer review committees who represent our member countries and who represent the entire breadth of and diversity in the life science. Once you get funded, you will get from us the support over 3 years for doing your research, whether you are a postdoctoral researcher or a research grant team. Here I show you sort of how globally we are, and this is really in the truest sense of the word. You see in blue our member countries and in yellow all other countries, plus in addition to our member countries where HFSP research has or is taking place. So it's very much a global operation that HFSP organizes in terms of grant competition. We are very successful, having just received 2 Nobel Prizes this year. David Baker and Gary Rufkin have been grant awardees previously, and so with their 2 Nobel Prizes, our total goes up to 31, which we are very, very proud of. But we also have many of our grant awardees that have received Canada Gairdner Awards, Kavli Prizes. We are literally a fixed element in the breakthrough prize list for the life sciences and in the Lasker Awards. But we are also very proud that 8 of our female awardees have gone on to win the L'Oreal UNESCO Women in Science Award. This is something we cherish a lot. A couple of numbers. By now, we have almost 8,500 scientists supported that separate onto more than 1,200 research grants and a couple of thousands of postdoctoral fellowships. So we have received applications from over 70 countries, from over 70 nationalities, and currently research has been done in 59 countries where HFSP research grant awardees have their laboratories. If you're interested in what we do, in the type of the science that we support, we just published, end of last week, the latest edition of what we call the HFSP Science Digest, and it's a compendium of research projects that have been terminated or that came to an end last year, and those that were just supported. And so it's really like a highlight and gives you a very good idea of the type of research that HFSP supports. The fellowship program we will not discuss, and so with that, I'd like to thank you. And if you have any questions, just contact us. either right to fellow or to grant, we're almost really appreciative of receiving messages. We rather have you contact us in writing than submitting something we're not sure you are eligible or whether that would fit our scientific mission. So with that, I'll finish my talk and hand it over to Almut for introducing the research grant program. Thank you.
Almut, you are muted.
Sorry. Hello, everybody. Sorry for the problem. Nice to have you all here. I will give you a tour about what the HFSP research grants mean, how you can apply for them, and then a few tips what to do and what not to do when you apply. HFSP supports, as Guntram mentioned, frontier research in the life sciences, in the broad life sciences, and we have two types of research grants. For all research grants, they are team grants for 2 to 4 senior scientists. Senior meaning scientists who have their own lab, or at least can decide about their funding and their research program. We fund any basic topic at the frontier of the life sciences. And it has to be a research question that is new for all team members, not just the next logical step in the lab. All research grants provide funding for 3 years. And then there are the two sub-programs, the program grants, which are for scientists at any career stage in their independent career. And then the early career grants, where all team members have to be within 5 years of their first independent position, meaning after the postdoc, and within 10 years after their PhD. What are we supporting? Well, as we said, basic research that is focused on the elucidation of the sophisticated and complex mechanisms of any living organisms. It can be really any topic, from molecular research to ecosystem level, or even cognitive functions in neurobiology. As Guntram pointed out, we suggest that interdisciplinary work is actually what allows us to really address the difficult questions that are open these days. So interdisciplinary means that we integrate approaches from different fields, for instance, material science, chemistry, physics, mathematics, psychology, into life sciences research to get more approaches, more points of view, and new knowledge. Obviously, the projects have to be innovative, original, and have the potential to move the frontiers of knowledge. All projects have to be international and preferably intercontinental. And as Guntram pointed out, we embrace high-risk projects if they promise high gain. And that means that if you have preliminary data, it's no longer really novel. So it allows you to ask a research question for which you have never done any preliminary research. And as the project really aims to support all the different aspects of life sciences, all projects are reviewed by a single, strongly interdisciplinary panel with 24 members from anything between mathematics to cognitive neuroscience to ecology, who all together have the ability to really see the novelty in projects. What HFSP does not support, so discouraging those who want to ask any questions in that realm, is applied and translational research. So clinical and pharmaceutical research isn't supported. Applied technology or engineering projects which develop a tool for industry or production. Studies that are concerned with improving the agricultural yield or conservation directly without really adding to our basic knowledge of how ecosystems work, agriculture, forestry, bioremediation. Those directly applied projects are not funded. And then also projects that are just collecting huge amounts of data or large sets of observations are not funded unless they ask functional questions. And research in for-profit environments doesn't receive funding, even though teams can have a member and collaborate with a company. Having said that, many of the HFSP-funded projects still lead to patents or applications, which is all fine. It's just not the primary aim of the funding. So, to give you a little more technical details, the principal applicant has to be in an HFSP member country, and you've seen the map presented by Guntram in his first talk, but you can also find the country list on our website. But all the other team members of the 2 to 4 member team can be in any country on the planet. A team of 2 members receives $300,000 per year for 3 years. A team of 3 receives $400,000. A team of 5 receives $500,000. The funding can be used for any cost associated with the research grant, except a few things, and specifically it's not possible to pay the own salary, the applicant's salary, but it can be used for the salary of postdocs, technical personnel, PhD students, and so on. If more than 1 member is in the same country, then we reduce the award sum, just to encourage international teams. Presently, we receive around 800 letters of intent at the first application stage in a year, which means that about 2,000 scientists are involved in these applications. Of these, 80 to 100 letters of intent are invited to submit full proposals, and around 34, 35 grants are funded every year, which means that about 40% of the full proposals are supported, but only about 4 to 5% of the initial LOIs. So the competition is high, but the first level of application is also a relatively short format. The first stage of application is the letter of intent, and to keep the dates in mind, which you also find on our homepage, you have to start a letter of intent by opening the site and saving the first page on 18th of March next year. It has to be submitted 9 days later, and then it'll be evaluated whether the proposals are in scope, so completely applied medical or technological applications, or those which are not in the field that we fund will be removed. And then the review committee will review the remaining applications and select about 250 which have the highest potential. And of those will be discussed by a smaller committee with about 10 to 12 committee members, experienced reviewers, and they decide which 80 to 100 letters of intent are invited to submit a full proposal. This information was sent to all teams in the beginning of July, and or in the middle of July. And then the submission deadline for the full proposals is in mid-September. The full proposals are reviewed by 4 to 6 experts in each of the application's fields. Then they are reviewed and ranked by the review committee members, discussed at the review committee meeting, which is end of January, now 26. And the notification after the approval by our Board of Trustees will be sent out end of March. You will find the application guidelines already on our homepage, but the site will only open in January. So, what makes a successful HFSP project? Basically, it's a project that stimulates novel, daring ideas and innovative approaches in the basic life sciences. So, as I said, preliminary results are not required and actually are not wanted, because if you already have results, maybe the project is no longer new. There are no priority areas which field you can apply for. It's really you, the applicant, who decide which applications come in. And the review committee will look at all of them with the same view of, is this novel? Is this exciting? Is this a really new idea? It's really important to include scientists from outside the life sciences, or at least from very different ideas, parts of the life sciences, which bring new understanding, new methodology, new concepts, and approaches and perspectives to a research question. And definitely, you have to have an international and preferably intercontinental team. Specifically, all Europe teams are very often not as innovative in their ideas, and actually not so many of the purely European or purely North American teams are supported. Seems not to be the highest novelty in these projects, as experience shows. It's really important when you think of a project to not just suggest the next logical step in your research. It's really an opportunity to develop new lines of research in your laboratory, which are only possible because you collaborate with colleagues with whom you've never collaborated. It's also important to convince the reviewers that the team will be working together in getting these new ideas and solve problems that a single lab could not tackle on their own. So, a few more ideas. It's really good to start early. We hear from awarded teams that they've been discussing repeatedly before submitting their letters of intent, because developing team projects simply takes time and several rounds of thoughts and discussion. So when you start build a team that is international or intercontinental, that is interdisciplinary, where each of the team members brings complementary expertise to the research project. Submit a project that is new, a team that is new and hasn't collaborated before. And really think of any blue sky frontier paradigm shifting idea. Good ideas? Well, every team member has to bring their own approach to the research question. A team with 2 members that are working in similar areas and bring similar expertise will not fly. Think of a question that's really at the front of your field and don't shy away from risk. But if there's a risk, identify it and explain how it may work. Make sure that each investigator, each team member is essential to the team and the project. Very often teams of 2 to 3 for the early career are successful, and more than 4 members are rarely successful. Because very often if you have more team members, there'll be an overlap in expertise in many cases. Convince the reviewer that the team will really interact closely and iterate, for instance, between experimental and theoretical components. Explain very carefully and in detail, if models are included, how they are planned. There are modelers, there are mathematicians, there are computational biologists in the review panel, which will identify whether models are and concepts are suitable. As I said, don't submit the next logical step in your research program. Submit something that's really clearly different from what you're doing. Don't submit an application that you think would be funded by your national research funding agency. That's very often good criterion. Definitely, collaborations within a single country are not eligible. It's not eligible to have more than 1 member from the same institution, even if it's an institution that has dependences in different countries or cities. For instance, some of the universities that have a university in another country, or Institut Pasteur in different countries. Don't add someone because of the famous name is not going to fly. The reviewers will identify that maybe that person will not do the work that somebody else wrote up for them. And even though you may have applications in mind, do not start with, we will improve the therapy of, or we will cure something. Really ask the basic underlying research question that you aim to solve. And if that leads to a cure or a therapy, that's fine. But that shouldn't be your first focus in this type of application. Keep in mind that the letter of intent is a very short format. And on the HFSP homepage, there is a little document that you can find that's called Writing a Letter of Intent, which gives you detailed information on the format. So you have to use that short format wisely. And here are a few tips from having read many of them. Don't use understanding the something or revealing the something in the title. It's a very common way to start proposals. Really get to the point directly. It's the letter of intent where most applications are rejected and where the reviewers really critically read whether there is a new idea. So you need to win the reader in the very first sentences. You need to make the project sound interesting to a more broader reader, because the review committee member, even though it's 24 very smart and wise people, are not going to be specialists in your specific area. And that's why simple language and style can be more convincing than a very complex way of writing. So to achieve that, ask someone from outside the field to read it. It helps. Are abbreviations needed, or can they be replaced? Are the concepts clear for a general reader, a general highly educated reader? Do not waste words by saying this is interdisciplinary, international, innovative. This should be clear from what you write, from the project itself. And do not waste space to say how fantastic the team is. It's more important to say what each team member will do. The reviewers will read the CVs of their team members, which are part of the application, and will see how fantastic the team is from the CVs and publications. So use the space that is given in this short format wisely. About 10 to 15% of the applicants are invited to write a full proposal. So I'll give you a few short tips on that as well. The full proposal has space for detailed information on the project, the methods, the concepts, and how you aim to interact. So in this format, it'll be clear for the reviewers whether the project is really a genuine collaboration or actually mainstream or continuation of the work in one laboratory where the other team members just are helpers. So it needs to be a genuine collaborative project where each team member has an important role. The full proposal will also show whether there are already preliminary data and the project has already been started, which is a no-go for HFSP funding, because there are so many projects that are novel that those that have already been started will not be funded. It's not helpful to list all potentially possible methods that could be used. It's important in that format, in the full proposal, to really let the reviewer know what you plan to use, and if that doesn't work, what's the plan B? Give really specifics on models and computational methods the committee knows, and also the specific expert reviewers will know. It's important, even though it's a new project for your lab, at least it's supposed to be, to read the literature and not miss important papers because the reviewers will know the literature. So it's really important to make sure that you're citing important new literature. And a last and final comment, you will be invited to suggest reviewers. HFSP will invite some of them and some others, but please suggest reviewers that don't have a conflict of interest with you, because they will declare that and not review. So think carefully about this particular point as well. So with that, here is the information on the application cycle again. And both Guntram and I will be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Great, Almut. I suggest the following. There are questions both in the chat, but also I just saw a first question in the Q&A box. Maybe we deal with that first, because I think this seems to be a question of general concern, which we see often. The question reads, would proposals that include researchers from a number of subdisciplines within one field be considered, or do the researchers need to come from distinct fields of research? I think it's the kind of the textbook example, Almut, from the neuroscience community. You see the question?
Yes.
Maybe you want to go first?
Yeah, so neuroscience that's a typical question. In neuroscience, for instance, interdisciplinary is really a very gray zone term. There are actually proposals, for instance, in neuroscience, where there is a modeler and somebody working on behavior and a third person doing really novel optogenetics methods. If it's an exciting question, that can fly, but you need to really clarify how things will come together. It's really difficult to reply to that question. If you have a specific question on that, send an email to grant@HFSP and we can give you better advice. It can be, there are teams of biologists that are so diverse that that's really perfect. But there are other teams where the reviewers would say, but why didn't they ask a mathematician? Or why did they ask a person who's already been working in this particular field? It's not going to bring new ideas if you add somebody who's sort of already very much in the field. Very often the new ideas come from folks that haven't been working in that particular field so much.
Almut, let me just add, from the HFSP point of view, what sometimes we consider is of the approaches that different team members use. So the approaches have to be very distinguishable between the different team members.
Yeah.
Just to add what Almut said. So there are a number of questions now in the webinar chat. Let's go through them from the top down. There is a first comment. I would appreciate to have examples of topics that were awarded. Let me just share my screen again and show you live how you can find out about research that has been funded. So I'll do this very quickly. I'll share my computer screen here. And as I pointed out in my presentation, this is the announcement of today's thing. You can go to our Science Digest, which Liliana just published, and read through examples of science projects, of grants and fellowships that we've supported. If you want it more in a structured way, you can go to our awards archive, go to Awardees, Awards. They have a filter. If you're interested in grant awardees, program grants in the year, you click apply and you have all the 2023 program grants by topic, team members, and a public abstract. So here you can really search and find research that has been recently funded. We can do the same thing for the early career grants from last year. So you see all the early career grants that were funded last year. So this is a one-stop shop for you to find out what kind of research HFSP has funded previously. So there is another question. I'm going to scroll up a bit. I hope that will be helpful. Do we have templates of letter of intent? No, we usually, Almut, you want to go at this first eventually?
Yes. So a template, not really, but if you go into the application guidelines, which you find on the website, there's a link to, as I said, a little document that says writing a letter of intent. And that has actually all information that you need about the project. It's a 1,200 character abstract, and it's a 1,200 character field for each of the sub-projects. And with sub-projects, we mean the same number of sub-projects as the team has members, and so on. So in that document, writing a letter of intent, you find all the detailed information.
So we don't have a specific template, nor do we have example LOIs that were submitted previously, because what may have been Frontier 2 years ago may no longer be Frontier and may not be helpful in your attempt to get a grant. So there's another one in the webinar chat, and there are a couple of questions in the Q&A chat, but let's deal with this last one on the webinar chat, Almut. Hello, if in a 3 to 4 member team, 2 of them belong to different institutions within the same country and are interdisciplinary, would that be allowed?
That's definitely allowed. It is possible. It would be important then that the 2 members in the same country really represent disciplines that are vastly different. Still, given that we have 800 applications and only about 5% can be funded, reviewers will look a little bit more critical at those applications than at those that are fully international. But it's definitely allowed, and there are projects funded which have 2 members in a country.
Yeah, I just got another reminder from Liliana. Thanks for that. There's another source for you to inform yourself about what HFSP has funded, because last year we started to publish something which is very new and which we try to do that again. In our news and archive on the website, you find 2 little booklets, the 2024 Fellowship Awardees and the 2024 Research Grant Awardees. That's literally the same thing as our online award archive, but just for this year. So another one for you to look at if you're interested in what we fund. And Liliana just pasted the link into the webinar chat, so you can go there. One more question here, Almut. Do different Max Planck institutes in Germany count as different or same institutions? The old question.
Good question. What do we answer, Guntram?
Well, I suppose.
I think they do.
I think they count as different ones if there is no obvious collaboration, which is a criteria for the grant, of course, and if there is no, I call it a conflict situation, and if they are really interdisciplinary, but then that needs to be shown in the proposal. Another one from this part, I have a novel idea. I can't wait more than a year to start work on it. I have no preliminary results, but will have ones during the review process. That's fine, I would say.
That's good. Don't publish it before you
keep it to yourself, Yeah, exactly, and excite the review committee with a great idea. So, and then let's turn to the Q&A box here. There are would proposals that include researchers from a number of subdisciplines. I think we answered that one already.
Yes.
And we answered that one. Oh, Karen copied that over. So I think we have answered those already that are still listed as open because they came in from the webinar chat. Any more questions? If not now, Almut had shown at the end of on her last slide the contact, and I can only reiterate what we said earlier. Feel free to write us a little message. So, for example, if you write a little message to the grant office to Almut, hey, I have this team, there and there and there are we. This is the fields that we represent. Would that work? So, really do take the opportunity. It is transferable to another country, a grant, Almut? There's a question.
I just share the contacts again.
Here's the email, exactly.
We do have many teams where a member or two move during the period of the grant. If a team is international at the letter of intent stage, and then suddenly all team members move into the same country before they start the grant, that is not allowed. I mean, then they can't be funded simply because then the team is no longer international. If team members move after they've started the grant, it has happened many times. And actually, they do move the grant. So the grant belongs to the abode, not to the university where they work. And we strongly encourage to move equipment if it was purchased for the grant project, and that's in the agreements.
Right. And the email you have again in the webinar chat. Any other questions? You can write questions while you eat your lunch. We have no problem with that. Thank you, James, for listening in. It was a pleasure to have you.
There's another question.
Yes, there's another question. Sudipta, that's nice to meet up again after our India meeting. But in case equipments are not allowed to be transferred, that's of course a tricky one. Almut, I guess it would depend on the size of the equipment.
Equipment is always complicated, right? It is, for instance, possible if equipment is very expensive that it is purchased together with other projects in a university, and then if the grant has only paid half of it and another project has paid half of it, of course it's difficult to move it. It's not impossible usually to make a deal with the university where the equipment is. If you move, that you're still allowed to use it in your previous university. Try to make a deal in that situation. We've seen many different cases where equipment has been moved, has not been moved, has been used. So that sort of depends a little bit on how you work with your university or your institution. You can also, if you anticipate to move, decide to buy the equipment at the new place already. That's really a matter of each single case to be solved as good as possible, so that the research can be done and that the instrumentation can be used in the most optimal way for the project.
Just another question popped up. Can you confirm that the time between the LOI release announcement and the submission date is short and only 1 to 2 weeks?
No,
not really.
No. Sorry, that was a misunderstanding. We opened the website in mid-January, and the submission deadline is end of March, so it's 2.5 months. However, we ask applicants to open their application the latest on the 18th of March. And the reason that we have a deadline for opening an application and for submitting it is that it's really important to see which information you need to enter in the application form. It is a team application, and if it's really intercontinental, you will have team members in different time zones. So if you only start filling in the web form the day before it's due, you'll not be finished, because each team member has to enter their CV. Each team member has to add 10 recent publications, and each team member is asked to sign and approve what has been applied. So you have 2.5 months, but you need to start working on the web form 10 days before you have to submit. So keep in mind both deadlines.
So there's one more question in the webinar chat, which I pick up from here. By how much gets a grant reduced when 2 team members come from the same country, Almut?
It's $50,000 US dollar less per year. So a team of 3 members where 2 are in the same country will get 350,000, not 400,000.
Okay. Well, the definition of frontier science, there is no fixed definition. It's a concept. It's a circumscription. Frontier science for us begins where there is an apparent lack of knowledge or there's a gap in our understanding. That's what we mean with frontier science. There's a question from Francisco Almo Aurelalo. If I defended my Viva on the 27th of March, so I still qualify for the early careers grants modality.
That's exactly, yes. We actually accept the date when your PhD was conferred.
And not the defense date.
And not necessarily defense date if you want to be on the safe side.
But this, Francisco, sorry, Almut, this, Francisco, is a question that you could then send to Almut, to the grant office, with more information, on all these dates, and then you get a written answer back to confirm that you are eligible. Another question, can researchers form teams with researchers from the Global South who are not HFSP members, and will they get research funds in their country? I'm happy to answer that. Absolutely, yes. We would encourage anyone to enter a research collaboration with colleagues or scientists from the Global South, if we accept this as a very broad term. Absolutely, this is clearly something we welcome. It doesn't carry a benefit in the review, I should say this, okay? It doesn't carry a benefit, but it is something we absolutely encourage and would like to see more of that, please.
And it may not carry a benefit, but reviewers are looking at that very carefully. And if you, for instance, aim to collect data in Zimbabwe and don't have a team member from the country that will make a serious contribution to the project, not just the person who
Yes.
gets the permits, that's not allowed. But if you have a team member who will make a contribution, a proper contribution to the project in the country where you aim to collect data, that will be seen very positively.
Yeah.
And just to your second question, will they get research funds in their country? Yes. So the funding works such that each team member gets the funds into their university directly. So we do not send all funds to the PI of the team. We send the funds to each team member directly from Strasbourg.
Just one addition to what Almut just explained. What we don't like to see is that I phrase it in a slightly sort of casual way, that two Westerners team up with a scientist from the global South just to have possibility for sample collection there. This is something that we don't like to see. As Almut pointed out, we really insist on full integration and full collaboration with the scientists in these countries. Another question, Almut? Yeah, go on.
No, I may give an example. We are presently funding a grant on mosquito swarm behavior, where a member is in a country where mosquitoes are very prevalent in Africa. And that person actually is responsible for a major part of the behavioral data collection, while other team members in other countries are responsible for modeling and for developing tools to measure things. So
yeah, and you can pick up this grant from the 2024 research grant booklet that I showed earlier. It's in there, actually. Another question there. What is going to happen when a group member changes the lab country in a non-HFSP country or drop out into industry due to salary restrictions? Is the grant withdrawn from all members? Is the grant transferable? Bit of a tricky question. I think it depends.
So we've had a team where the PI started in an HFSP member country and then moved to a non-member country. But luckily, there was another team member in a member country. So we urged the team to change the PI, and now someone else is the PI of the team. And the team member who happened to move, in that case, to Hong Kong, is still a team member and the grant is still funded. We also have a team, and it's not so complicated, where someone actually went to industry but kept an affiliation at the university. If that is an option for someone who leaves to industry, then funding can continue to go to the university where the grant work is done, because basically the funding cannot go to an industrial partner simply because this is public tax money, which shouldn't fund industry. But usually if a team member aims to continue the kind of basic research that HFSP funds, it's very often possible to keep an affiliation at the research institution where, for instance, the postdoc or the PhD student who does the hands-on work on the grant is still active. And if that is possible, the funding can continue to go to that research institution. Otherwise, if a team member moves completely to industry but aims to continue working on the grant, then the funding would be reduced by that team member's share, but the other team members would still receive their funding if the team aims to continue to work.
And in a more general sense, in particular for young scientists, this is something, the sooner you know that and the sooner you write to the grant office, the earlier you get a solution and support from the grant office. So don't sit on the problem. If you have a problem on the horizon, already contact Almut to get an idea of what to do. So the question about how much a grant is reduced when two team members from same country, we answered that. It's 50,000. Another question from Sudipta in India. One final question. Research grant is for 3 years, right? It is for 3 years. In case of all objectives are not addressed within 3 years, then it's extendable under any circumstances. Almut, I'll let you go at that.
So we sent money in for 3 years in a row. and the team can end their grant after 3 years and submit their final reports and then go on. But the team can also use the funds for a 4th year in case it has funds left and work to do. That is not so uncommon because many teams need to first hire personnel, need to first build equipment, and usually work goes more slowly than one would hope. And so there is a 4-year period to use the funds and do the work, and then there is a final report. Experience shows that many of these teams who've started on a really, really risky and novel adventure are still working on the grant 5 or 6 years later. That's fine. We will see the publications come out, and that's all good. We ask for a final report at the stage when the project officially is closed. But research doesn't work like with deadlines of that kind, as you know.
Yeah, that's the way it is. Yes. Very nice. Any other questions, guys? As said earlier, we are just an email away. Not a problem if nothing comes to mind, but tomorrow you said, oh, should I ask this question? Just drop us a line. It's not a problem. I would suggest we give it another 2 minutes and eventually then close the webinar. I'm glad to see so many attendees from different parts of the world. I think that's very nice. That's what we wanted to achieve here. Just to let you know, I mentioned this in my intro, we do plan a webinar for launching the 2026 HFSP Fellowship Call. Do follow us on our social media channels. We will announce this in good time so that you, for example, when you are the head of a laboratory, get to know how you could use our fellowship program to bring new postdocs to your lab, but also how you can advise your students when they want to apply to work abroad. So it goes both ways. So please consider joining us then, most likely at some point in February. We haven't sort of figured out when exactly, but be prepared to join us for the fellowship webinar in due course. Right. Nice to see that our interns learn a lot here today. It's great. With Mama and Karen. Oh, who is that? Tang Wudan, thank you for joining us. So I think this was it. As said, looking forward to meet you again online for the fellowship webinar. Thank you from all of us in the HFSP Secretariat in Strasbourg. Happy holidays and all the best for the new year. See you soon. Bye-bye.